Hey, everybody, welcome to Pit Stops to Podium, the Rev Partners podcast, where we talk to execs who have competed and won, taking their companies from high growth to high scale. My name is Brendan Tolson. I am the co-founder and CEO of Rev Partners, and I'm delighted to have with me today Kevin Gaither for this episode of Pit Stops to Podium. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to participate and help you out, Brendan. Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fun relationship that's been developing over a period of time, and I think it's Jeff Ignazio that actually connected us originally, and we were starting to talk about RevOps and sales. So this is going to be a fun one for us. For our audience who may not be familiar with who Kevin is, he's got quite an impressive background. So I just want to share that with everybody to kind of level set as to who you are. So Kevin Gaither is the former SVP of Sales at ZipRecruiter, where he led a team of over 550 Inside and Enterprise Sales folks. So he knows a thing or two about sales. Recognized Inside Sales expert, hands-on technology sales leader with over 25 years of experience, early stage to multi-million-dollar businesses. And in fact, you've taken 3 companies into that Inc. 500, Deloitte Fast 500 companies. So very impressive background. And currently, Kevin, you are now serving as an advisor and consultant to a handful of early stage tech companies, and also serve as the co-host of SaaSHoles Podcast, which I'm a big fan of. So this is a treat for me to have you on, and thanks for coming onto the show.
You got it. Thanks for having me. Let's get to it.
Yeah, well, but Kevin, in terms of, we talked a lot about what you've done from a work perspective, but I think it's always fun for our audience to understand who you are outside of work. So before we get into the meat of this conversation, which gets into your core competency on sales, let's get to know who you are. So what are 3 fun facts that our audience should know about you outside of work?
Yes, there's probably only a handful of people out there that know all 3 of these facts. Some know some, but not others. I entered UC Davis back in 1988 with a degree in aerospace engineering, of all things, and actually graduated with a degree in architecture. Reach out to me and I'll tell you the reason why. So that's fun fact number 1. Fun fact number 2, literally nobody ever told me that I should be in sales. And in fact, my first sales manager, that we affectionately called El Diablo, by the way, he was not a nice dude. He told me that I should be an analyst instead of getting into sales. And by the way, the reason for that was because I was really metrics oriented even back in 1994, 1995, like looking at my numbers. And he thought I should be an analyst.
Yeah, when it was more of an art than a science.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And then fun fact number 3, those that have heard me before have heard me say this. I've actually always said that if I had all the money in the world, I'd actually be a math teacher. I love cranking on spreadsheets. Hate doing decks, but I love cranking on spreadsheets and working on math problems because, as you said, sales has become more of a science than art these days. And somebody who is a aerospace engineering wannabe, kind of systems thinking kind of fits in play there.
So this is kind of off script, but how did you go from that background into sales?
Yes. I'm also incredibly competitive. And my first job out of school, so you have to understand, back in 1993, we're in a little mini recession, Brendan, and their jobs for architects, by the way, were not aplenty. And so I just took a job in customer service, wearing a headset, 1-800-DIAL-BEN, how can I help you? And I was making $10 an hour, and that was all the money in the world to me. But I was sitting right next to another guy who was making $11 an hour. And, we talk, we eat, how much you make? He's like, I make $11 an hour. I'm like, how in the hell do you make $11 an hour and I make $10 an hour? And he's like, I've just been here longer. And that drove me crazy because he didn't score as well on his tests. They had me training new people that came on board, and it drove me crazy. And I thought, how in the world can I then do something to control my income? And I thought, one, I can start my own business, or I can get into sales. And I didn't have the guts or the idea or the money to start my own business. So I forced myself into sales. And my mom, I remember her saying, but what if you don't make your quota that month? Like I'm not going to eat or something like that. But I burned the ships, man, and just decided that I had to get into sales. And literally my very first commission check in my entire life was $19,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was through 3 months in, and we're talking $1995 too, by the way. So it was a sizable check, and I was very hooked. But it was all about being competitive, and I just had to get into sales because I wasn't going to sit there, Brendan, and wait for a boss to give me a great review at the end of the year and give me like a 6% raise. Like I wasn't gonna be down for that. I wanted to give myself the raise. That's why I got into sales.
Well, and it proved to be a great decision in light of the background we mentioned at the beginning of the call. So let's dive in a little bit because you know in light of your experience, you've learned how to build a sales organization, understand what it requires to be successful in sales. And so I think it's a really pertinent topic, especially in this current climate. And so the big idea that we want to talk about today, especially with you and your background, is how to recruit and retain top performing sales talent. And so I think it'd be helpful for you maybe just to level set before we get into kind of the meat of this, like why does that matter in this current climate today? Why should we be talking about sales talent, both on the recruiting and the retainment side?
Well, I mean, it's so hard to do. It's so hard to hire people these days, even higher, than before. You can have all the best product. You can have all the best technology, to support your salespeople. But if you put the wrong butts in the seat and don't set proper expectations with those people that are the butts in the seat, it's all for naught. It's all for naught. And so focusing, and everyone says you got to focus on your employees and all that kind of stuff, but how to do that really strategically and tactically so that you can look for the right people, attract the right people, but then retain them over time. That's where the real magic is. And like I said, I'm just going to repeat, you can have the great product and you can have awesome tech and awesome benefits and all that kind of good stuff. Snacks in the office, if you ever get back in the office. But if you don't attract and retain high quality talent, you're screwed.
Yeah, I like that. So let's park on the first side because we're going to talk about recruitment and we're going to talk about retainment. And so how do you get people into the organization? And then we'll talk about how to keep them at the organization. So when we talk about recruiting, I like how you kind of frame it. You have this idea of define what great looks like, and then you define what a great, efficient process looks like. And a lot of your experience of building a 550-person organization at ZipRecruiter, I think you have a pretty good understanding of what that looks like in terms of what to do and what not to do. I think what would be helpful, Kevin, I might pull up a screen for those that are looking at this video so they can see your slides as you talk through both what great looks like and efficient process, because I think there's some really good information on that slide as you start talking through that. So I'm going to share my screen now. And so if you're on audio, I would encourage you to come and listen to the video. So let's first talk about what great looks like, Kevin, on your side with recruitment.
Yeah. So, I learned this lesson long ago and made a lot of mishires. And I really hated having that conversation where, hey, it's not working out, so, we have to go. And so I wanted to mitigate that as much as possible, because when you hire somebody, you kind of fall in love a little bit when you make a hire. And so, I didn't want to have those breakup conversations. How can I improve my probabilities of success? This is definitely not a binary type of thing. And one of the things I learned was to define what great looks like. What is that? That's quite simply a hiring benchmark. If anybody knows Stephen Covey out there, one of the 7 habits is beginning with the end in mind. And so you have to answer this question. This is, very tactical for your listeners. If the job could speak to me, what would it tell me that it needs to be successful? Okay. And what you'll go through is a very awesome brainstorming process where you just, greenfield, get a whiteboard with 7 people in a room, those that do the job, support the job, manage the job. Just get in the room and you start to writing out characteristics: need for achievement, coachability, competitive, good communication skills, highly organized, whatever it might be, process driven. And you just start writing this stuff down, and then you start prioritizing and combining, like, well, that sort of sounds the same as this, whatever. And you narrow it down to like 8 to 12 different characteristics of what good looks like in the job, again, or great looks like. Again, if the job was to speak to me, what would it tell me that it needs to be successful? Once you've narrowed it down to those 8 to 12 characteristics, Brendan, then define what those things actually mean. Why is defining so very important? Because one person might think coachability means one thing, an interviewer, a hiring manager might think coachability means one thing, whereas another hiring manager might think that coachability means something else. So agreeing on what that definition of coachability means is critically important. So we're going for the same thing. So we're gaining alignment on what great looks like in that particular characteristic. Then from there, you come up with your 3 or 4 behavioral interview questions that help you identify at what level does this candidate possess that particular skill. No candidate is perfect. You're not likely to find, 5s all down the line, but tell me about the last time your manager gave you feedback, and then tell me what you did about that. Okay, that in the coachability example here, okay? Tell me about a time that you actively went out and sought an improvement for yourself without being prompted, whatever. So all these behavioral-based questions. And so most people don't do this, by the way. They just say, hey, Brendan, I have this candidate coming in today. Can you sit with them for a second and tell me what you think? You don't know what you're going for. And usually what you end up doing is an incredibly biased exercise of, do I like them or not?
Right.
And that is one jacked up way to interview candidates. So instead, I'd say, Brendan, I want you to go in there and evaluate this candidate based on coachability and organizational skills. And here's the pieces of the benchmark that I want you to ask. And I'm giving you a mission. I'm giving you a mission to ask these questions, and then tell me, does this candidate, at what level does this candidate possess coachability, need for achievement, whatever those things might be. So let me stop right there. You good there on what great looks like?
Yeah, I love it. To me, it's creating an intentional process behind it. We'll get into more of the process in a second, but it's putting the burden and the responsibility on the manager versus the candidate in my mind. It's like, you need to be the ones driving this and knowing exactly what success looks like. Yes. And eliminating the subjectivity that so often happens. To your point of, do I like this person or not? And that's not going to set you up well for success.
If there's any listeners out there that are still asking the questions, tell me about yourself, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You're doing it wrong. It means you have no intention. It's a great point, Brendan. No intention.
Well, Kevin, this is likely informed by some of the lessons learned along the way. So we talk about things to do, and we already kind of just teased out what not to do. But let's talk through that a little bit further, because I think there's some good practical insights, tips, and tricks that our audience, especially those who are building out a sales team, can definitely benefit from. Yeah,
no doubt. So mistakes that I've made in the past is where I've looked at my top producer and said, Chad or Sharon, those are my top producers. Why don't we just, what do Chad and Sharon do? This is equivalent to, the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is the worst team in the NFL, for those that don't watch football, worst team in the NFL, looking at their top receiver and saying, okay, we want to, clone our top wide receiver. That's what's going to get us to a Super Bowl. You're missing out on what it takes to be the best wide receiver, in the NFL, to help you get to the Super Bowl. So don't look at your top producers, especially if you're an early stage company. You may only have 1 or 2 salespeople. So now you look at those 1 or 2 salespeople and are like, oh, let's just clone Tom. Don't clone Tom. Ask yourself what the job needs to, and you'll make tons of mistakes because you're trying to find Tom, but you're missing out on the characteristics that you need for that job, for that salesperson to crush it. Number 2, this is not, it's not binary. It's not, how do I put it? It's not, well, right there on the screen. It's not black and white, okay? And so you may find a scenario where you've got this benchmark, for example, and you go down the list, and people are giving you good answers to the question, but there's something behind the scenes that's like, it's not clicking. There's pheromones going back and forth, and something's weird, but yet you're getting all the right answers, but something doesn't feel right. You have to trust that. And I've made mistakes there where I go, well, look, they answered all the questions the way, and then I hire this person, they're cuckoo for coconuts, man. Like, so you gotta make sure that you listen to that gut as well, but that gut doesn't come first. It's the objective analysis informed by the insights that are coming from your gut, where it's like something just doesn't fit here, something doesn't make sense, here. Maybe they can't manage their Zoom. Every time I get on a call with them, it takes them 10 minutes to get their Zoom up and running and their camera running. But then when I do get up and running, they answer all the questions properly. You got to trust that gut. And then finally, don't force yourself to fall in love with a candidate. You can convince yourself and go, God, well, that was, maybe I should hire them. Maybe no. And the way that I've looked at this is hiring is like falling in love. You know it. You know it when you feel it. You're like, this feels right. If you find yourself going, God, I'm not sure if I should make this hire. Maybe don't make the hire. Don't make the hire, because I have made the mistake where I just go, I'm not sure, but I made the hire anyway. And I'm telling you, literally every time I've convinced myself to like a candidate and make the hire, every time it's been wrong. And that's not hyperbole. Every time it's been wrong. So don't convince yourself to like a candidate.
I can sympathize with that last bullet. Trust your gut. So I really like that. So these are really good practical insights. That's why I like this podcast format, because it's giving, based on your experience, giving our audience some insights on what they can take back to their organization. So we talked a little bit about defining what great means. Yep. Now let's get into like the process side, because one of the interesting findings we saw on a recent study was just the speed at which people want to go. And so one of the things that I love, both from the interviewer and from the interviewee, that speed is really important. And I think the next section is really great because you create a framework of how to drive efficiency in the process. So let's talk a little bit about how you think about a process from a recruitment perspective.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, there has to be one. Okay. It can't just be, haphazard in any way, shape, or form. When prepping for this, I thought to myself, in today's labor market, a thorough process probably doesn't work because the candidates won't tolerate it. And so I actually put a poll out on LinkedIn to find out, like, what do candidates want? Do they want a lengthy, very detailed process? Do they want it just to sort of be, one or two calls, make me the offer and I'll choose? Or do they still want it to be, a couple of weeks and still be, thorough? My gut told me that candidates these days, just give me the offer. I'm in demand, couple of calls, you make me the offer. And the truth is, and what I learned from the studies, at 65, the poll that I put out there, 65% of my respondents, they still want a thorough process that's like no more than 2 weeks. So they want time to be they want to be selective about the places that they're going, and it is a job seeker's market, but they don't want just like, hey, you look great, let's hire you after one or two calls. That's not good enough for candidates, especially because it's a tight labor market. And so I show you this, and remember one thing, Brendan, you can have a thorough process and still be quick. Okay. Yeah. Don't create a process that's intentional. I love the word that you've used before. That's intentional. You have goals for each step of your process, but you also do it quickly. So, for example, this is a process, and I'll read it out loud for those that are doing the audio piece here. You would have an application that has screening questions right out of the gate. Here's your pro tip, by the way. You don't need to review a resume. Just look at the answers to the screening questions that candidates are giving you. And maybe there can be some open-ended text questions in there as well. And that should take the candidate, 5 minutes to fill that stuff out. Have a 15-minute phone screen, have a 45-minute interview with the sales manager, then have a 45-minute behavioral interview where you're going deeper into some of those behavioral interview questions on the benchmark. A sales assessment. Take it or leave it, by the way. Some people like sales assessments, like those personality assessments or sales assessments they take offline. I've liked them in the past. Then in face-to-face interviews, 90 minutes of face-to-face interviews, and then do your reference checks, thereafter. This is a real process that I used at previous companies to help me improve my probabilities of hiring good candidates. Most people, a lot of people have said that don't do a process like this, have said it's too much. High quality candidates won't do that. It's not true. And here's why. Because you're setting the tone with these candidates that not everybody makes it through this process. It's like the NFL Combine, okay? Not everybody can make it through the NFL Combine to be in the NFL. And so and however your process looks, I'm suggesting you have a process that has multiple steps with it, so that you have multiple data points with the candidate, and that the candidate also has multiple data points with you. Let me stop. Where do you want me to expand, contract? Where do you want to go from there, Brendan?
Yeah, I think the impulse reaction when seeing this, I was just trying to count up. I'm not great at math. You're more the math guy than I am, but I was counting up the minutes on the chart that it's in front of me, and it's 4+ hours of activity. And the knee-jerk reaction is, man, that's a lot. Who has the time to create that? And then I'm reminded of, we had Rob Foreman on previously. Rob's one of the co-founders of SalesLoft. And Rob talked a lot about how, from a recruiting perspective, as a leader, would argue that is, if not your number one priority, it's in your top 2 or 3. And so you need, there's nothing more important than creating this framework to ensure you get the right people in the right seat. So, and I think a lot of people just default to, lazy is too strong a word, but the default is, I don't want to create this because that's just too much work for me to do. But if you're a leader and you're building a sales organization, it creates leverage and allows you to scale your organization because you get the right people in.
That's correct. Look, the old adage goes, hire slow, fire fast. Okay. This is part of gathering as much data and insights through that interview process. And if you do it quickly and haphazardly, you're not getting standard sets of data against which you can improve your probabilities of hiring success. And that's what this is all about, improving your probabilities of hiring. Brendan, I thought about this in terms of before our call today. You can literally ask anybody, any hiring manager, do you think you're good at interviewing? And I guarantee you that 80-90% of them would say they're really good at interviewing. Yeah. But none of them likely have actually measured their probabilities of success with their hires. And here's a simple way to do this. Look back on people that you've hired after 6 months and ask yourself, knowing what I know now, would I do it again? Is that number better than a coin flip? Because most people have it as good at coin flip or 30% hiring success rate. I was able to, after screwing up for year after year after year and having those uncomfortable termination conversations, I was able to, at business.com, I was able to increase my probability of success up to almost 80%. In other words, wow. 80% of the people that I hired, I looked back after 6 months and I said, knowing what I know now, I would hire that person, again. And it started with a thorough, intentional process with a benchmark and step-by-step, a real codified process. Hey, kind of sounds like a sales process, by the way.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Well, I like this idea of, you mentioned it's kind of a coin flip and improving the probability. What are ways that will decrease the probability, or at least keep it very gray from a coin flip perspective?
Yeah. Well, first of all, don't optimize your, if you don't optimize your process, your hiring process, what I delineated before worked for me. And we changed it when I got to ZipRecruiter, and it was different thereafter. As an example, the demo, there's a lot of hiring processes out there where the last step is, okay, you're going to come in and you're going to do the presentation. Okay, first of all, what does good look like in that presentation? Do you even have a scorecard for what you're looking for in that? But number two, is there any sort of correlation between those that do well in that demo presentation and hitting minimum thresholds or achieving quota? And when I measured this, there was literally, and I had it in my process, but then I measured and looked, guess what? I'm in LA. Actors did really, really well in that process, but there was literally no correlation between doing well in that demonstration or presentation and doing well on the job itself. And so I got rid of it. So make sure that you're flexible with your hiring process and, expanding and contracting. At one company that I was at, we actually got rid of reference checks entirely because we found that literally they'd come back, great, A player, fantastic, all the time. Of course they weren't, but but the point was we never, how do I put it? The reference check was never a reason for us to get rid of a candidate in like 99.9% of the situations.
Interesting.
So we got rid of it. We did background checks, obviously, the legal stuff, but we got rid of reference checks, in entirely at one of my previous companies. Overvaluing the bachelor's degree. This one, I love to like snicker, and I love to like, taunt people on this particular topic. At ZipRecruiter, we hired thousands of salespeople over the years, thousands. And we had a very large data science team, and that the net here is the end story was we found that having a bachelor's degree did not improve the probabilities of a salesperson hitting quota or not. End of story. And so it opened up the hiring spigot for us because we didn't require a bachelor's degree anymore, which, by the way, it's like, great, other companies, you're going to require it. The pool you're fishing in is smaller. Fine. Those that want a competitive advantage, forget the bachelor's degree. And then I gave you this other one before, like reviewing resumes. For God's sakes, it's a marketing vehicle, okay? If you're any company of any size, you've got an applicant tracking system of some basic level, and that applicant tracking system likely has screening questions when they apply. And it's either upon the application or after the application, they fill out, you have them fill out screening questions, most of which should be binary in nature. If you have as an example, the compensation for this role is a base salary of $75,000 and variable of $75,000. Does that meet your expectations? Yes or no? Simple as that. That's binary. I want to kick those people out. I don't care what their resume says. If the comp doesn't fit their expectations, why do I want to talk to them? If you're in the office, if you require being in the office, this is a job that requires being in the office. Is that acceptable to you? Yes or no? This is a job that is highly transactional. You'll be required to sell about 20 transactions a month. Do you have experience doing that? Or stated in a different way, my previous sales have been highly transactional, 6 to 10, 6 to 20 transactions per month, very strategic and complex, 2 transactions per quarter. What kind of salesperson are you? If you're highly transactional, why would you hire somebody who all they have is this enterprise level experience? You want to create these binary checks because in order to get through, you're gonna literally go through 100 resumes to make 3 hires. Yep. How do you shorten that out? Don't review resumes. That's your hack there. And the mistakes I made was like looking at resumes, and it's like, for God's sakes, just give me the binary data.
I like it. So these are great tips and tricks. Let's transition. So we talked a lot about the first part of this is talking about how to getting people in. Yeah. So how do you get the right people in the right seat? But I think the next part is just as important as once you get them in, how do you keep them? And so let's talk through, I really like that you kind of have 3 core topics in this section. And we're talking about like the onboarding experience, creating clear expectations, and then them understanding what does their career path look like so that there's clarity for that. I wouldn't call them a candidate at this point. This is an employee. And so let's talk through some of these kind of practical tips that you've outlined to ensure that the onboarding experience goes well, that the expectations are clear, and that they have a trajectory that they're excited about. So let's start on the onboarding side. Yeah.
So I'm going to steal one from the great Trish Bertuzzi at the Bridge Group in Massachusetts. You know Trish?
She's great.
She's great. I look up to her. Some people call me an inside sales expert. She is the inside sales expert, in my opinion. And I'll steal this one from her. This is what she said in the past. You make the strategic decision to make a hire, but then you make the tactical mistake of poor onboarding. And it couldn't be further. I mean, it couldn't be, more true. You hire somebody and maybe it's one-off or there's 3 or 4 people and you sort of go sit with that person. What's next? Go sit with that person over there. And there's no like real goal and there's no agenda and things like that. And so what you want to do is, and this could be very fast, I believe in, get the salesperson onboarded as quickly as possible and on the phones as quickly as you possibly can. 3 days, 4 days. I mean, it depends on how complicated your product and your sale is there. But day one, they sit down. First thing you're doing is you're handing them their schedule. Now, remember, Brendan, they have bet their future on you. They have made a decision that they want to be with you. It's kind of like, imagine going out to on a date with somebody and you go to, I don't know, Chili's or Applebee's or wherever you like to go. And you show up to meet this person. You're really excited to meet them. And then they're sort of like on their phone and distracted like the whole time. And you're like, my God, I'm betting on you, but you don't seem to have your stuff you're not really that into me. You don't really seem that into me. And that's how some people do this onboarding process. So instead, you want to paint a picture. Here is your schedule for the next 3 days or 3 weeks or whatever it is. And I would literally delineate it out. 8 a.m. to 9, you're meeting with Billy, 9 to 10, you're meeting with Jane. And this is the topic that you're covering. And, 5 o'clock, we're going to do a roundup with KG and a quiz the next morning. And I'm delineating all this so that, Brendan, they have zero time to think about whether or not they made a bad decision or not. Because when you say, go sit with Jane, go sit with Bob, go do shadowing, go shadow so-and-so. For God's sakes, we have Gong, we have Chorus. Why is shadowing even a thing anymore? But anyway, have these candidates, these new hires that you've invested in, paint a really clear picture of what we're going to accomplish. And as I've put on this slide in particular, you want to cover sales training, company training, product training. What's company training? You know what? It doesn't hurt to go through policies and procedures and expectations with your employees, what our culture is like. Product training, that's where most people tend to focus anyway. They're here, click here, click here, click here. This is how our product works. That's not the kind of training that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, yes, you need to do that, but then you need to, like a sales engineer could help translate what pain that feature solves. That's a better conversation, as well as doing role plays and doing the presentation there and doing the openers and things like that. And then the sales training, don't forget, just because they come to you with some sort of sales experience doesn't mean that you shouldn't give them sales training on how to handle objections or how to do discovery questions, in particular, that suits the sales leader and their methodology. You need to provide that kind of training. And so again,
Kevin, do you find that those are equally weighted from a training perspective, or are there ones that you would say of these three, of sales, company, and product, this is the one that I would spend a disproportionate amount of time on?
Yeah. I would say I would focus on the sales training, component. Well, I think it would be more important, followed very closely by the product training and weaving it together, because I want to be able to, as an example, SDRs can be trained and AEs can be trained like what qualifying questions to be asking. But if they don't know why they're asking those questions and how that relates to some of the product features that solve the pains that they're uncovering in the discovery, so you kind of have to put it together. But I would definitely put the sales training first. The company training just all relates to the, what it's like to work here, and that's important. You're in our house now, so you're, clean up after yourself and put your dishes away. That's just setting expectations in that regard. And then the next after great onboarding is clear expectations. And I spoke a lot about that just now on the company training, but I mean this to be something different. I learned this from Dale Carnegie long ago. There's this thing that they created, at least I think they created, called the PRD, the Performance Result Description. What I like about this, coming from the aerospace engineer, architect guy, it objectively defines what good looks like. It's not a job description. It's what good looks like in this particular job, so that it's really clear. I have a client right now, as a matter of fact, that's saying, yeah, how do I get my SDRs to make phone calls? Like, what do you mean? How do you get them to make phone calls? Have you defined what good looks like? Have you defined that in order to do the job well, you need to be doing a combination of activities, And so, creating something that objectively defines, what it looks like, maybe in your world, Brendan, you hire an operations person. And what good looks like means that 90% or 99% of the tickets that they receive are opened in less than 12 hours, scoped in 24 hours, and resolved with 99% satisfaction or something like that. But you're objectively defining what good looks like in that job. On the slide, the number one item here was, what's it take to get fired around here? This is one of the things that I do when I come into sales organizations. I ask that brutal question to the salespeople directly. So do you know what it takes to get fired around here? You'd be shocked at how few salespeople actually know what it takes to be fired around here. Why is that important? I'm no psychologist, Brendan, but somebody once told me that there's this thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's like a pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid is security. And in order to get to your higher self, like, high performance, you need to have a level of security. So knowing how you're going to get your ass fired or not knowing, actually state this the other way, not knowing how your butt's going to get fired creates that insecurity. It's an unstable ground from which you're trying to do your job, but you don't know, is 99% to goal 3 times in a row, missing goal? Am I going to get fired for that? And Billy just got fired on February 1st. I don't know why. I don't know why Billy got fired. Am I next? Was it random? Is that layoffs? Or did Billy do something, incorrectly in the job? So writing that down very clearly, what does it take to get fired? What does it take? Number one, you're going to mitigate risk. So when you want to actually terminate somebody, it's written down, it's very clear, and that commission plan is signed. That's incredibly important in my opinion, and making sure that it's very transparent, what it takes to get fired. We'll talk about, the opposite of that on the next slide in a second there. And then, this is hard. Look, I've done the job of leading sales, but then I'm also sort of operations, and I'm also a little bit of recruiting, and I'm a little bit of HR. Like, I've been at startups my entire career. And so I know that wearing multiple hats thing. And one of the things that's helped me tremendously is having a written policies document that's a living, breathing document in Google Docs, or, back in the day, Salesforce had the solutions tab. They don't have that anymore, but this living, breathing document that delineates, standard operating procedures and all these if-then statements. Who owns this lead when there's a conflict, which happens all the time. Starting to write those things out, make it really, really clear. I even have a document that says, if you're sick, stay home. Now, again, this is when we were in the office. If you're sick, stay home. And this is when it was just startup type of stuff. If you don't write it out, people don't know what to do. And then you run yourself into a situation of like, well, they should just know better. No. Let's not assume. Assume. Okay. And we talked about the PRD, what does it take to do the job well? But the next piece, after setting those clear expectations, the next piece is like a really good career path. And the visual here delineates what promotion means, what goal means, and what demotion means, or termination, of course. And what you want, stated positively, what you want, Brendan, is a scenario that you can, when you hire a high-performing person out of the recruiting process, you're discussing a promotion path, because guess what? Every candidate says, what's my career path? Every single one is going to say, what's my career path? And if you say, oh, well, we got, one level, and it's to senior AE 2 or AE level 2 or senior AE or something like that, and that's it. They're wondering, well, what else is there, for me? Okay. What's really critical in establishing a career path like this is you're establishing a promotion threshold that is above goal. Brendan, if you hit your goal, I'm saying to you, Thank you for doing your job. I'm paying you your market compensation. That is not promotion worthy. You just met my expectations. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Promotions should be challenging. Promotions should be difficult. Promotions should be reserved for your top 20%. Promotions shouldn't just be handed out, because you just showed up and hit your goal. So you want to delineate, if you envision the world of your salespeople as a bell curve, okay, your promotions occur at the far right-hand side of your bell curve, where not everybody's going to get there. Everybody has the chance to get there, but not everybody is going to get there because you've set that at 120% to goal, 150% to goal, or whatever that might be. And you are also setting that with high specificity. You're saying, okay, your quote is $100,000 of ARR per month. If you hit $120,000 of ARR per month for 4 out of the last 6 months, then you will earn an automatic promotion. Period. End of story. There's no presentation. There's no interview. You come to your manager and say, pay me, sucker, because you've earned it. You've made it very, very clear. So you've delineated what promotion looks like, and you've divined the consistent performance. Everybody has seen the salesperson, Brendan, that close that one whale, close the one whale, and then they get a promotion. And then they don't do so good after they get promoted. Okay, fine. So what we want to delineate is that high performance over a consistent amount of time. So if you're doing enterprise sales, you might delineate, 2 quarters in the last 3 or 3 quarters in the last 5 at 120%, or greater. That way you can mitigate the whales getting people to promotion thresholds. And like I said, have multiple levels to it, not just one level, because once your top producer gets to that next level, they're going to say, well, what's next? Well, that's it. We got senior AE. Congratulations. They're going to be looking for something else. You want to retain these people by putting into multiple levels. And to be clear, this is a bonus. Higher base, higher variable at each one of these levels, and a higher quota. I've seen this mistake so many times where they increase the base and they increase the variable, but they don't increase the quota. No, financially, it still has to make sense for the business. So increase that quota. They're going to make more money. Ideally, you're giving them higher quality leads. You're putting them into a better territory, too, if you can do that. But higher base, higher variable, and higher quota goes along with that.
Yeah, I love this framework. I mean, I think to me, what it speaks to is that it removes the ambiguity.
Yes.
It helps define the rules of the game. And if you have high performers, which inevitably you're going to, with the whole probability, you're increasing the probability, but you're also saying, hey, here's the path that we can lay out for you if you do perform. And so I like to your point, you have level 1 all the way to level 4. If you have high performers, they want to know not just what it looks like next step, but hey, I want to be a VP of sales. I want to be a CRO. I want to know what that looks like over a 5 to 10 year period. So giving them that not foundation, but really the framework. If you're a high achiever, you're going to do it because that's what you want. So you're making it very clear that there's an exchange here that if you do these things, we will reward you. And this is what it looks like.
Yeah, that's right. Objectively, some of these promotion processes, it's like you have to interview for it and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, no, don't mess around. Just make it very clear. Here's the target. Here's where you need to get to. And when you get there, we will give it to you. No questions, no questions asked. And that is, if anybody is listening to this and could do those 5 things in the 2 areas, recruiting and retaining, and do, the 2 things in the recruiting and the 3 things in the, in the retaining, is this easy stuff? No, but if you can cordon off that time, slow down to speed up, build those things into your company, you will be improving your probabilities of success in hiring and retaining high performing salespeople.
Yeah, I love the improving the probability. I mean, sure, it costs more time on the front end, but the back end is where you reap the reward. And it's like, so if you don't do it, then you have to deal with the churn that you talked about and trying to find more talent. That's just cost prohibitive versus put the upfront work in, and then you start to see the leverage when you get these top performers that are coming in with their probability increasing. So Kevin, I loved learning about how to recruit and retain top sales talent. This has been super informative for me, and I'm sure it has been for our audience. If our audience wants to engage with you, what is a way, like what social media platforms are you active on that they can reach out to you?
Yeah. LinkedIn is probably the best way. Just find me on LinkedIn, / Kevin Gaither, I think is what it reads there. Shouldn't be hard to find me there. And frankly, email me if you want, kevingaither@gmail.com, not difficult. From there, I just got my TikTok account set up about 4 months ago. So if anybody wants to follow me there too, but LinkedIn and email is probably best from there. And I'm happy to help. I love helping people out. So don't be bashful. Reach out to me. Love to help you.
Well, I can speak firsthand that is a genuine statement. Kevin has been a great resource for me and become a great contact as we've gotten to get to know each other. So Kevin, thanks again for stopping by. Really appreciate your insights on this topic. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.